Micheál, could you tell the listeners when and where you were born and some details of your early childhood days?
I was born in Longford town, 1936, and I was christened in St. Mary's Cathedral. It was burnt down since and rebuilt, and I was taken by train from Longford up to Sligo or Ballina on the way to Donegal, and my aunt she kept me on her knees all the way, and I left. My father was stationed as a guard up in Donegal, and I don't remember any part of it. I left there probably when I was about 3 or 4, and we moved on to Oughterard, and from there then into Galway. So that was the start of the.
So you went to the local schools there, was it?
I lived in number 9 Nuns Island.
Yes.
And then my wife now lives in 9 St. Mary's Road. But I went to the local schools, only three doors away. St. Patrick's, not St. Patrick's, we called it the Bishop School, the Bish.
The Bish, okay.
And across the road then you had the seminary, so with at the primary school and the secondary school across the road. And when I'd wake up in the morning and look out the window, I'd see the school. It'd be a bad start to the day.
So you couldn't escape the school. You had it morning, noon and night.
Morning, noon
and night. So when did you decide on a career in engineering? Where did you study? And what was your first job in the profession?
I always liked engineering. I liked things mechanical or electrical and working your hands and whatever. Engineering appealed to me, and when I lived in Nuns Island, my mother gave a bit accommodation to some engineer from the OPW, Mr. St. John, and he stayed in the house when he was surveying for the curb drainage scheme in the County Galway, and I see all these waders and ranging rods and tapes, and I thought he was God Almighty to come down at the cross, and possibly that has some influence on me. I never expected to get to engineering or whatever.
Yeah. And you lived among the great water engineering, the hydrology engineering of Galway, with all the beautiful canals on your doorstep at Nuns Island.
Oh yeah, well, that could have an influence.
Yes.
Say one doesn't know.
Yes. And so where did you go on to study engineering then?
I went in 1953. I went from St. Joseph's up to UCG that time.
Yes.
And it was only 10 minutes walk from my house in Newcastle Road. And it was, if I couldn't have gone to university in Galway, I wouldn't have gone at all because of the economic situation.
Yes.
So I'd walk up and down the canal every day, twice a day to college.
So you were born into education. You had the St. Patrick's, the Bish, and the university right on your doorstep. All in the one triangle, exactly. So where was your first job after you qualified as an engineer? I take it was civil engineering.
Civil engineering, yeah. Well, I qualified in 1958, and there was an economic recession in Ireland, like many more, and the whole class of 35 engineers headed for London. So there was a public works exhibition on in Olympia, and a lot of us turned up there, walking around and looking for some outlet. And funny enough, I got a job with a Tilbury Contracting and Dredging Company that have an office in Moorgate, and I was working within 3 days.
Wow.
And I was never out of work a day since.
Yes.
And I lived down in Clapham Common and got the train every morning up to the office of Moorgate.
Yes.
Across London Bridge.
Yes.
So
London was being rebuilt after the war at that time, was it? A lot of engineering and development going on, probably.
Well, the post-war boom in Britain would be 1950. Post-war, there was a lot of building going on that time.
Yeah. So how many years did you work in London?
I was 6 months in London, and then I got into more interesting work up in Birmingham.
Oh, in Birmingham.
And
yes.
then I was at London Airport for 6 months, and I was on the Great Ouse drainage scheme up in Norfolk.
In Norfolk.
In a very minor capacity.
Yeah. That was the Norfolk Fens. They were being drained, were they?
The Great Ouse drainage scheme is massive. It's like Little Holland there with all the flat ground.
Yes. So you were into the airports, as you were saying. You were into the waterways.
Yeah.
And the drainage. So how many years did you spend in England then, between the different?
I spent 4 years in England.
Yes.
And then I came. There was a job advertised by the ESB for engineers, and I sent away for the application form, and for a friend of mine, and I got a telegram then 2 days later to come for interview in Dublin. So I couldn't resist the temptation. So I went for interview, and
yes.
At that time then I got bad news that my father had cancer.
Okay, so you had to make the decision. But in your time...
Again, back then I came to such an opportune time.
Yes. Just when with Seán Lemass and everything, the country was changing, and electrification in the 40s and 50s. Yeah. But what was it like in London as a young man? Was there a good social life? And did you enjoy it? Were you connected to the Irish community?
I was Cricklewood and
so you stayed within the Irish community, or did you branch out to different?
I'd be with
everybody.
I was down in a 2 people in a room and about 20 or 30 people in the house.
Oh, so it was
all over.
Yeah, you were like sardines then.
And Indians and
yeah. But did you enjoy the different environment that London had to offer in England to Ireland, or was it not something that you considered radically different?
There was a lot of excitement there, the pubs and music and women and dancing the whole afternoon.
Yes,
but at that time you wouldn't be praising a country. You just sort of go with the flow.
Go with the flow. But it was the beginning of the rock and roll era and youth culture. Were you part of that? Or?
I wouldn't even be aware of it.
Okay, so you were there to do a job or jobs, and you got it. And so you had the opportunity then to come back to Ireland in '62, was it? And with the ESB in Dublin.
'62,
yeah. Were you based in Dublin?
I came back to Galway. And I worked with Captain Brendan Sugar in the fire service for about 6 months, and I got a permanent job then in Dublin, with Dublin Fire Brigade, and I was there during the strike, where the firemen went on strike for 2 weeks, and the refuse collectors went on strike for 2 weeks. And we had to, 2 or 3 of us had to take up residence in Tara Street Fire Station.
In Tara Street.
There we were doing the phones and the first turnout.
And what was your job with the fire service?
Fire Prevention Officer, Grade 2.
Okay. And what did that involve?
Doing inspections on property and dealing with planning applications.
Okay, so excellent. So you were involved in the planning element from an early stage, So, Micheál, you've had a powerful impact on the development of Galway City, and your legacy is a strong one that you must be fairly proud of. But before we go into the activities of what you've done within Galway City in terms of preservation of its heritage, could you provide some details of your work in the county of Galway, starting with this fine Georgian mansion that we're in at the moment, that was owned by the Lambert family, members of the Anglo-Irish aristocracy, and in which you now call home. So your work within the county, the heritage properties that you own, and what you've done in the county.
Well, with Castellana, I saw a small advertisement in the Connaught Tribune of a semi-derelict house for sale on 9 acres in the Athenry area. So it was sold by public auction, and
yes,
that day I couldn't attend the auction because I had a meeting arranged in Galway. So a friend of mine went out and he'd be in a better position to negotiate than I would, and he came back and told me the house bought. I couldn't believe it.
And what year was that, Miho?
1974.
74, you bought the house, okay.
And then a week or two later, then I brought out Margaret and five kids. I know it had been 5 that time, but
yes,
with 4 at least anyway.
Okay.
And,
so when did you get married, and tell us a little bit about your family?
I got married. I got married to a girl from Roscommon, Ballinlock, and we had the marriage ceremony in Roscommon.
Yes.
And we were blessed with having five children.
5 children, cohorticus, yes. And how many grandchildren now do you have?
We've 19 grandchildren.
90, that is fantastic. I've seen the lovely family photographs that Dermot puts up on a regular basis. So when did you come back to Galway City and County? Did you get a job within what was then a combined local authority? Was it? What year was that?
It could be. I'd be guessing about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
I'd been working on the Dodder Valley drainage scheme in Dublin.
Yes.
And I got a lot of experience on laying and putting in fairly substantial infrastructure. And I got this posting with Galway Corporation, and 3 or 4 years we put in a drainage scheme just ahead of the university. Myself and Michael Martin, the engineer, we laid an enormous pipe up to the university only weeks before they started developing up there. We just got in time, and without that, they couldn't have expanded the place.
Yeah, that must have been early 70s then, was it?
It was. Well, I think Jim Regan, the planning officer, he was responsible for keeping all the land up along the corridor free for the university. And at one stage we had this planned giving up in the Great Southern Hotel, and it was said that to the only city in Europe that had unlimited scope for expansion on its own campus.
Extraordinary.
Up along a lovely river.
Up along the banks of the Corrib, absolutely.
Well,
was the local authority, was the city and county one at the time?
No, there were two separate.
Oh, there were 2 separate ones, yeah. So you became, what position was your most senior while you were in the Galway Corporation?
Galway Corporation, yeah.
Yeah, what was your most senior position in it?
I was senior executive engineer.
Senior executive engineer itself. And when did you retire from that?
25 years ago.
25 years ago. So back in about late 90s then you retired.